Imagine this. In the dead of night, the sky over the desert suddenly tore open. A blinding white flash split the heavens like a wound. The ground trembled softly, and a low, bone-deep hum rang through the stillness, like whispers from another dimension. No one could explain it. But anyone who saw it was never the same again. Don't forget to like and share this story with your friends or loved ones. Help spread awareness and caution through story. May you be rewarded for subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing this narrative. Now let's get into the story. 1989. Somewhere outside El Paso, Texas, under the blazing sun of the borderlands, Raul Mendez started his morning like any other. A rancher in his late 50s, Raul was a quiet man of mixed Mexican and American blood, someone who understood silence more than words. He wore his old leather hat, carried a thermos of black coffee, and led his horse out along the fences that outlined his property near the Chihuahuan desert. But that morning something felt wrong. The sky was still gray from the storm the night before, and the air felt heavy. The earth beneath his boots held on to a strange warmth, warm but unnatural. Buzzards circled low and aimlessly. And worst of all, the desert was quiet. Too quiet. Raul saw something glinting just over a shallow ridge. He dismounted. There, scattered across the sand, were twisted shards of metal, smooth, slick, and shining like frozen mercury. They weren't ordinary. One piece, no bigger than his hand, bent easily when Raul squeezed it, but returned to its original shape seconds later without a single dent. No burn marks. No smoke. No heat. And when he touched it, his skin tingled, like holding a static charge that never discharged. Even his horse refused to come closer. Raul took a small piece and pocketed it, his heart pounding. Then, without a word, he turned and rode back to his ranch. Less than 2 hours later, the sound of engines shattered the silence. 3 unmarked military vehicles rolled onto his land. Men in dark uniforms stepped out, no names, no badges. One handed him a printed order and began confiscating the strange debris. Another blocked the road. A third scanned the land with strange equipment. Raul was ordered to sit on his own porch while they swept the area. One of them, tall, pale, with mirrored sunglasses, stood over him. What exactly did you see this morning?" the man asked, voice cold and flat. Raul thought carefully. His instinct screamed at him not to tell the truth. "Just some wreckage," he lied. "Didn't mean much." The man gave a slight nod, then leaned down close. "For your safety and your family's, forget you ever found it." They left as quickly as they came. By nightfall, Raul stood alone in the dark, staring at the stretch of desert where it had all happened. There were no answers. No explanations. Only questions and the weight of a truth too dangerous to speak aloud. That night, as he sat on his porch with a fresh cup of coffee, something strange happened. The air changed. No crickets. No owls. Only silence. And then, far in the distance, beyond the hills, a faint red light shimmered in the sky, like an eye opening. Watching. The day after the military sweep, Raul sat at his kitchen table, the small piece of strange metal he'd hidden now resting in front of him. It pulsed faintly under the kitchen light. Not with sound, but with presence. Raul stared at it, watching how the surface shimmered in a way that seemed to change with his emotions. He placed it in an old wooden box and locked it inside the shed out back. That night, at precisely 2:17 a.m., Raul awoke suddenly. A low-frequency hum, not audible but felt in his bones, filled the air. He stepped outside, flashlight in hand, heading toward the shed. The door, he had double-locked it, was wide open. The wind was still. The desert silent. Inside the shed, the box lay open. Empty. And on the dusty floor, faint impressions, not footprints. Not claw marks. More like pressure left by something floating. Something heavy. The next day, Raul drove out to meet someone he hadn't spoken to in years, Javier Trevino, a seasoned border patrol officer with a reputation for keeping his mouth shut and his eyes wide open. They met in a roadside bar near Socorro, sitting in the back corner where the jukebox no longer worked. Raul told him everything. Javier listened without interrupting. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I saw it too," he whispered. "The night of that storm. I was patrolling the outskirts of an old migrant camp. There was a flash in the sky, bright enough to light up the whole canyon. Something shot across the air, fast as hell, no sound, no flame. It didn't crash. It landed. Or more like, it was dragged down. Raúl's fingers curled around his glass. Did you report it? Javier chuckled bitterly. You know better than to ask that. A week later I was put on sudden leave. When I came back, that whole area was flattened. Trees gone. Sand turned to glass. They sat in silence. They didn't need to say it out loud. Something had happened. Later that evening, Raúl found a small envelope slipped under his door. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper typed. Stop looking. Or you'll become one of the missing. Raúl didn't sleep that night. The following days brought more strange things. At exactly 2:17 a.m. each night, the lights in his house flickered. The television turned on by itself, showing only static and sometimes whispers. One of his cows was found dead. No blood. No wounds. Eyes blackened as if scorched from the inside. And one night, he awoke to find desert sand in his bedroom. Piled neatly under the bed. As if something or someone had come in from outside. And watched. Raúl began documenting everything in a journal. Sketches. Dreams. Changes in temperature. Voices. He knew something was building. Something that had started long before him. Flipping through his late father's notebook, Raúl found entries dating back to 1958. Descriptions eerily similar to his own: strange lights in the desert, buzzing sounds in the silence, a dark figure seen hiding between stones, something formless yet aware. But it was one sentence that chilled him the most. I've seen it. Not human. Not animal. Like fog with eyes. It didn't walk, it floated. And I felt it see me. Not just look. See into me. Raúl shut the journal. His hands trembled. He knew what his father had seen. What was still out there. And worst of all, it had never left. It was just past midnight in the northern edge of El Paso. A forgotten military outpost sat buried behind layers of barbed wire and bureaucracy. Officially, the building didn't exist. There were no records, no addresses, no signs. Just peeling paint, rusted gates, and windows so clouded they seemed carved from ash. But inside, someone had been keeping watch. Elena Castillo moved with practiced silence. A woman in her late 40s, her thin frame wrapped in an old Air Force field jacket, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Once an intelligence analyst for electromagnetic anomalies, now an exile from her own agency, she had spent years off the grid. Not because she feared exposure, but because she knew too much. And the name Raúl Mendez had appeared again. She pulled open a long-forgotten drawer and removed a file older than most living officers. Stamped in red. Zone 4 Incident Logs, 1947 to 1989. Inside were faded photographs, declassified satellite readings, and rough sketches of metal that behaved like liquid. But what caught Elena's attention was a report she'd never seen before. Level 7 biological energy threat detected. Object showed signs of sentience. Physical matter responds to human emotion. Memory interference confirmed. She flipped the page and found something even more disturbing. A black and white surveillance photo. A blurry figure in the desert, standing motionless in front of a makeshift military camp. No facial features. No clothing. Just a silhouette? But what truly unnerved her was the timestamp. July 18, 1951, the same night as the first signal disruption over the Trinity test site. Meanwhile, Raúl wasn't alone anymore. As the night drew on, a knock echoed at his door. He opened it to find an old man leaning on a cane, his face a road map of decades spent under desert suns. His name was Domingo Aguilar, a former contractor for the government during the 1970s. Domingo didn't waste time. You found something, didn't you? He said. Something that shouldn't be awake. Raúl hesitated. Then nodded. Domingo stepped inside and lowered himself slowly into a chair. His hands trembled not from age, but from memory. In 71, he said, we uncovered a structure out past Sierra Blanca. Not a craft. A capsule. Or an egg. We didn't know which. We couldn't open it. Hell, we couldn't even touch it without getting sick. But we knew one thing, it was alive. He stared Raul in the eyes. And it wasn't from the sky. Raul swallowed hard. Then where? Domingo's voice dropped. From below. The silence that followed was suffocating. There were others, Domingo continued. Migrants, miners, even some locals, they spoke of shadows in the rocks, voices in the wind, creatures without form crawling between crevices. We called them Los Testigos, the witnesses. Most disappeared. A few went mad. Raul sat frozen. Why me? He whispered. Because you saw, Domingo said. And they don't like people who see. Back in her bunker, Elena loaded a decades-old satellite feed onto a working terminal. It had been recorded using a classified system that tracked gravitational anomalies, not just light or sound. She scrubbed the footage back to the night of the storm, when Raul's land had erupted. A bright pulse appeared, not from the sky, but from underground. The desert pulsed. Like a chest breathing. Like something buried dreaming. She froze the frame. The topography shifted in a circular pattern, exactly where Raul had reported the debris. She whispered to herself, it's not new. It's never been new. The room seemed colder. The air thinner. She pressed play. The final seconds of the footage showed something rising. Not a ship. Not a light. A shadow. Crawling. And then the screen went black. 3 days had passed since the incident in Raul's shed. 3 days of sleepless nights, flickering lights, and shadows that never seemed to move the same way twice. The piece of metal he'd hidden had vanished. The military had said nothing more. And Raul knew he wasn't being watched anymore. He was being studied. Sitting in his dimly lit kitchen, Raul reached beneath a loose plank in the floor and pulled out an old, cracked leather book. His father's journal. He hadn't opened it in years. But now he had no choice. The handwriting was rough, often frantic. The first few entries were typical of a rancher's thoughts, weather, crop issues, border patrol sightings. But toward the back, the tone changed. His father, Jorge Mendez, had seen something. July 3, 1958, something stood in the canyon last night. Tall. Not a man. Its outline moved like mist, but its gaze burned through stone. I stayed hidden. I had to. I don't think it wanted to hurt me. I think it wanted me to remember it. Further entries mentioned sudden nosebleeds, forgotten hours, and the presence of a second heartbeat in the house at night. Raul felt like vomiting. This had happened before. And it had happened right here on Mendez land. He closed the journal with shaking hands. What his father described was nearly identical to what he had experienced. The humming. The sand. The shadow. The silence. Outside, a dust storm gathered on the horizon, but Raul didn't move. The truth was no longer buried. It had roots beneath his feet. Back in El Paso, Elena Castillo was staring at a corkboard littered with maps, declassified reports, and crude satellite overlays. At the center of it all was a single phrase circled in red. Node 0 absolute point of origin. Everything pointed to one location. A forgotten military installation just outside of a place called Camp Piedra, a testing facility that had mysteriously burned down in 1972. Elena knew better. The coordinates didn't lead to a base. They led to an entry point. A few hours later, she called Raul from a payphone. We need to go, she said. There's something buried under Camp Piedra. Something that was never supposed to be uncovered. Raul hesitated. I can't leave, he replied. Something is waiting here. Watching. But Elena was firm. Then it's time we stop letting it watch. They agreed to meet at an abandoned rail yard north of San Elizario. Javier Trevino joined them without question. At midnight, under a dying moon, they drove toward Camp Piedra in an old military jeep. The terrain was rough, filled with jagged rocks and miles of nothingness. As they got closer, the air felt wrong. Thinner. Sharper. When they arrived, it was clear, someone had been there recently. Barbed wire fences were new. Tracks from heavy tires cut into the sand. No official signage, yet clear indicators of surveillance. But the structure itself looked untouched: concrete walls, collapsed roof, a blast door half buried in sand. "This place is dead," Javier muttered. "No," Raúl said. "It's asleep." They entered through a breach in the west wall. Dust swirled under their boots. Elena's radiation meter ticked faintly, not with radioactive particles, but electromagnetic disturbance. Beneath the main structure, a staircase led downward, deeper than any of them expected. And at the very bottom they found it. Node 4 Pillar Western Access Point. The room was circular, metal-lined, and at its center stood a massive vertical column of glass and steel, part machine, part organism. Tubes pulsed. Lights flickered in rhythm with their breathing. "It's alive," Elena whispered. They connected Elena's old laptop to a dusty analog panel. After a moment, green text lit up the screen. Status: standby mode. Core function: inactive. Remote links: offline 3/4. Harmonic balance: failed. "What is this place?" Javier asked. Elena turned. "This is where it sleeps." Raúl stepped closer to the pillar. "Dior waits." Suddenly a low chime rang from the hallway. A sealed door creaked open on its own, revealing a tunnel lined with dead monitors and walls that seemed to breathe. They stepped inside. At the end of the hall was a viewing chamber, with glass walls overlooking a massive, spherical chamber. And in the center of that chamber, suspended midair, was something impossible to describe. A shape. Changing. Reacting. Reflecting. And on the glass walls around them, handprints. Dozens of them. Some small. Some far too large. Elena clicked on a hidden UV switch from the panel beside her. Ink lit up across the glass, revealing a message written in block letters. "They will not come out. But we will go down." Behind them, the pillar rumbled. The air vibrated. Something had sensed them. And deep beneath the desert, where light had never touched, something stirred. 2 days after they left Camp Piedra, Raúl, Elena, and Javier stayed in a rundown motel just outside Las Cruces. They spoke little. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was heavy, oppressive, like the quiet of a church after a funeral. Something had changed in all of them. Raúl barely slept. Elena spoke only in fragments, and Javier started hearing static in his ears that no one else could hear. Then, without warning, Raúl received a call. No voice. Just a series of beeps. But he recognized the pattern. Morse code. One word: 0. An hour later, a brown envelope appeared under their door. No return address. Inside, a worn map labeled in faded ink. Zone 0 origin point. But the location it marked wasn't where they had just been. It was further south, deeper into the restricted zones near White Sands. A place with no name, only a reference code. Eloque Omega. At the bottom of the map, scribbled in different handwriting, was a chilling message. Zone 0 was never built to contain anything. It was built to measure what comes through when we lose control. Raúl clenched the paper. He looked to Elena. "We need more than maps." They contacted someone Elena hadn't spoken to in over a decade, Eric Barlow, a former Pentagon systems analyst who had vanished from public records after leaking fragments of the Dead Sky Protocol. They met him in an abandoned movie theater. Eric looked older than his age, gaunt, paranoid, but still sharp. He handed over a thick packet of documents. "This is everything I could save before I disappeared," he said. "Blueprints, timelines, psychological assessments. And one thing you won't like." He flipped to the last page. A black and white photo of 4 massive towers, each a pillar. Underneath, a heading. "The Dead Sky Protocol, Framework for Consciousness Control via Environmental Trauma Anchoring." The pillars weren't designed to imprison a creature. They were designed to capture human fear, human memory, and feed it to something else. Something under the earth? Something that learned through us? They tried to weaponize the resonance, Eric whispered. It worked until it didn't. Raoul sat down, shaking. Do you mean they were trying to create it? No, Eric said. It was already there. But they tried to give it a shape. That's when everything started falling apart. Javier clenched his fists. So what now? What do we do? You activate the pillars, Eric said. All four. And then you seal the Omega node. Raoul frowned. And what happens if we don't? Eric looked at him with dead certainty. You won't have to worry about survival. Because there will be no you left to experience anything. That night, they loaded up the Jeep again. No music. No conversation. Just the hum of tires over desert roads and the rising tension in the air. They were headed for the northern pillar, buried deep in the mountain ridges near Sandia Crest, supposedly destroyed in a rockslide in the 80s. But according to Eric's data, the facility beneath the rock was still active. They drove through the night, headlights cutting into the dust. As they neared the coordinates, clouds gathered unnaturally fast overhead. Thunder rolled. And the moment they arrived, everything went silent. No wind. No insects. No static. The entrance to the northern pillar wasn't marked. It was hidden beneath a collapsed mining shaft, its outline just barely visible against the rocks. They descended into darkness. As they moved deeper into the underground tunnels, something became clear. This wasn't a place that had been abandoned. It was a place that had been left behind on purpose. The entrance collapsed behind them. Dust choked the narrow corridor as stone sealed the light of the surface. For a moment, they were entombed in absolute darkness, just 3 steady breaths and the soft whir of Elena's handheld scanner breaking the silence. Then the emergency lights flickered on. Dim red strips lit the hallway, revealing metal walls warped by time and heat. The air smelled of rust, damp earth, and something faintly organic. They had reached the northern pillar. This was no simple resonance tower. This was a control hub, built not to contain the entity, but to control its growth. As they moved through the first corridor, Raoul noticed strange markings on the walls, spirals, human silhouettes without faces, and one repeating symbol, a circle with 4 intersecting lines. Elena paused, brushing dust away from a nearby plaque. Unit 07 Harmonic Observation / Subject V07. Warning: Memory Degradation Zone. Prolonged exposure may cause dissociation. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and this time, a figure appeared at the end of the hall. A man. Still. Silent. Dressed in a tattered military uniform from a different era. Raoul raised his flashlight. Hello? The man didn't move. He just stood there, mouth slightly open, eyes glazed. Then, without warning, he spoke, not in words, but in radio static. A series of numbers. 529 Subject incomplete. Elena stepped forward. That's a residual loop. Not a person. A recording trapped in time. The figure vanished. And the hallway opened into a massive chamber. The northern pillar stood in the center, tilted, cracked, yet still active. Soft pulses of blue light shimmered from its core, echoing like sonar through the chamber walls. But around the base, scorched marks traced lines of failed circuitry and melted panels. And at the back of the room, behind a reinforced window, they saw it. A human brain suspended in liquid, wired directly into the control system. Raoul recoiled. What the hell is this? Elena stepped forward, horror on her face. This is the source of the northern pillar's signal. They didn't use computers. They used consciousness as anchors. That brain, that's Subject V07. A soldier who volunteered, or was sacrificed, to maintain the harmonic barrier. Javier lowered his eyes. And he's still alive? Not alive, Elena whispered. But not dead either. His mind is stuck between memory and resonance. Trapped in a loop where he can't wake up. Raoul looked at the pillar. Can we activate it? Elena nodded. But it requires a resonance match. Someone who can sync with the system and provide an emotional signal strong enough to override the loop. Javier stepped forward without hesitation. I'll do it. Raul turned. You don't have to. Javier cut him off. I do. I've seen things in war that never left me. Maybe that's why I've been hearing the static. Maybe. I'm already half inside. They strapped him into the chair beside the pillar. Electrodes attached. Fluid conduits linked. Elena typed rapidly into the manual override panel. Synchronization initiated. Memory core comparison acceptable. Warning, subject may experience temporal feedback. Begin? Y/N. Javier nodded. Elena pressed a Y. Suddenly the chamber filled with a low hum. The pillar lit up with shifting light patterns, fractal, hypnotic. Javier's body tensed, then relaxed, then spasmed. His eyes rolled back as the system began to play his memories aloud, not with sound, but with imagery on the walls. Gunfire. Screams. Children running. A moment frozen in time where he had to choose between orders and humanity. Raul watched in silence as Javier relived his worst moments. Then, something unexpected. From the pillar itself, a whisper. You're not alone. Javier gasped. The system stabilized. Lights turned green. The terminal chimed. Northern pillar online. Javier collapsed, eyes wide open, breathing shallow. Raul knelt beside him. Javier? He blinked. I'm still me. But then his voice changed. Just slightly. And so is he. Raul froze. A what? Elena looked at the monitors. There's residual presence. Part of subject V07 is now inside him. Javier stood slowly. I can feel him. Like a voice in a long hallway. But I'm in control. Elena pulled up the master terminal. A new message appeared. 3 pillars active. 1 remains. Final node, south. Raul exhaled. 1 more. 1 more to seal the entity and close the loop. But deep inside, he knew the final pillar, buried in a dry riverbed no one dared to cross, would not just ask for resonance. It would ask for sacrifice. They arrived just before dawn. The coordinates led them to a dried-up riverbed known in local legend as Arroyo de los Silencios, the Creek of Silence. The sun had not yet crested the horizon, but already the place felt wrong. Sound didn't echo here. Footsteps disappeared the moment they landed. Even Raul's breathing seemed swallowed by the air. Javier stood near the edge of the arroyo, his eyes distant, as if something was pulling at his thoughts. Since the activation of the northern pillar, something in him had changed. Subtle but present. Like he was never fully alone in his own mind. And yet, he felt more focused than ever. Elena, now exhausted but unyielding, reviewed the final blueprint. There's no official access point, she said. But somewhere under this basin is the southern pillar. It was the first one built, the last one tested, and according to this, never shut down. Raul frowned. Then why do we have to reactivate it? Because it's not the pillar that needs reactivating, she replied, slowly scanning the topography. It's the gate beneath it. They began digging through the sand and shale. Hours passed in silence. Until Raul's shovel struck something hard, metal, ancient, and cold. A panel. They cleared it and Elena pressed a series of coded sequences. With a loud clang, the earth trembled. The ground beneath them shifted, lowering like a giant elevator. As they descended into darkness, the platform stopped in a colossal chamber lined with jagged obsidian walls, unnaturally smooth. At its core stood a single black tower, unlike any of the previous pillars. This one was organic. It pulsed. Like a heart. A low-frequency thrum vibrated in their bones. Not sound. Not movement. Emotion. Despair. Rage. Regret. Grief. Raul staggered back. What is this place? Elena whispered, this is where the resonance was first created, not to hold something in, but to see if we could control it. The southern pillar wasn't just a node. It was the origin of the experiment. A warning. Raoul approached the terminal. It was still powered, though ancient. Its screen glitched in and out of focus, struggling to maintain signal. But the message was clear. Southern pillar dormant loop detected. Manual memory anchor required. Initiate realignment protocol? Raoul reached for the interface. But Javier grabbed his arm. No. I'll do it. Raoul hesitated. You've already carried too much. Javier shook his head. And you've carried it longer. He stepped into the platform, placed his hands on the interface, and immediately began convulsing. The pillar responded, tendrils of dark light reaching toward him, tethering to his spine, to his thoughts, to the echoes of V07 still living inside his mind. The pillar read him. Pulled from him. Became him. The walls around them lit up with scenes from Javier's past. His first mission. His first kill. His first moment of silence that meant more than any gunfire. And then the scene changed. Not his memory. Raoul's. Mateo. His brother. The day he vanished. The stone cave. The scream. The lie. Javier cried out, not from pain, but from recognition. This was never about me, he gasped. It was always you. Raoul stepped forward, overcome with guilt. I let him go. I was afraid. And I lied. I lied for decades. The pillar pulsed harder. Then, suddenly, a new message appeared. Duplicate trauma source detected. Requires dual anchor. Both of them had to sync. Raoul walked to the interface. Placed his hand beside Javier's. Immediately, the pillar screamed, not with sound, but with memory. Raoul saw Javier's battlefield. Javier saw Raoul's childhood. Time collapsed. Identity blurred. Emotions bled together. Two men broken by different wars, now facing the same wound. A final flash. Then stillness. A chime echoed. Southern pillar online. Harmonic link complete. Final node, LOK Omega. They fell to the floor, drenched in sweat, trembling. But alive. The pillar dimmed. The resonance, now unified across all four towers, flowed toward a single location, a place beyond maps, beyond language. Raoul looked at Elena. She nodded. It's time. The Omega node was calling. Not with threats. But with invitation. The night sky above the desert was not the same. Stars blinked in unnatural patterns. Clouds moved in silent spirals. And somewhere beneath their feet, four resonance pillars now hummed in unison, feeding energy into something the world had forgotten. The Omega node. The final destination. No one knew exactly where it was. Not even the maps from Eric Barlow could confirm it. But now, with all pillars active, the resonance signal created its own compass. A directionless pull, felt only by those attuned, Raoul, Elena, and Javier. They drove through the unmarked desert for hours. No roads. No signs. The GPS spun. The compass flickered. Then, as if reality folded inward, they saw it. A black monolith rising from the earth. Half buried, half emerging, its surface smoother than obsidian, colder than ice. No door. No windows. Only a symbol, etched in perfect symmetry, a circle split by a single line. The universal symbol for origin. Raoul approached. The ground trembled slightly beneath his feet. The monolith reacted. Seamless black stone shifted, revealing a descending staircase, spiraling downward, deeper than any bunker they had seen before. They entered. The descent was steep, endless. The air grew heavier, thicker. Time seemed to lose its meaning. Their flashlights dimmed, not because the batteries died, but because the darkness consumed light. At the base, the staircase opened into a room unlike anything they'd seen. Circular. Stone walls that pulsed faintly, as if the room itself was breathing. In the center, a levitating core, metallic, semi-organic, suspended in silence. It didn't move. But it felt alive. Raoul stepped forward. A panel rose from the floor, ancient and futuristic all at once. Omega node detected. All pillars active. Waiting for final input, primary trauma conduit. Elena read it aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. Gets you, Raul. It's always been you. He hesitated. His hand hovered over the interface. But then a voice echoed through the room. Not from speakers. Not from outside. From inside them. What you call containment, I call birth. The levitating core pulsed. You have gathered all pieces. You have completed the circuit. Now let me grow. Javier stepped forward. It's not speaking to us. It's speaking through us. Elena backed away, her face pale. This was never a prison. It's a womb. And the pillars weren't locks. They were contractions. Raul closed his eyes. Memories flooded him. His brother Mateo swallowed by the rocks. His father silenced by fear. Elena's child. Javier's war. All of it, offerings to something that fed not on flesh, but on memory. On emotion. This being, whatever it was, had existed beneath human consciousness for centuries. Perhaps longer. It had no shape of its own. Only the forms it absorbed. And now it wanted more. It wanted manifestation. The panel flared again. You may still choose. Seal or become. Raul turned to the others. If we leave it open, it becomes part of everything. Everyone. Javier spoke through gritted teeth. And if we seal it, part of us goes with it. Elena looked at him. You mean you? Don't you? He nodded. Slowly. I can feel it inside me. Ever since the North Pillar. A whisper. A mirror. Maybe I can take it back in. Pull it inward. And stay. No, Raul said. It was never meant to be you. He reached for the panel. Javier grabbed his wrist. I already lost myself once. Let me finish this. Raul looked into his eyes and saw clarity. Not fear. They embraced once. Quick. Wordless. Then Javier stepped into the circle beneath the levitating core. The room shook. Lights flared. The entity began to form, a shadow taking human shape. Limbs of vapor. Eyes of sorrow. Then Javier spoke. I carry the wound. I carry the silence. I carry the witness. His body began to fade. Not die. Not disintegrate. Merge. And with a final pulse, the core collapsed in on itself, imploding into a pinpoint of light. Then vanishing completely. No explosion. Only silence. Real silence. The kind that doesn't echo because nothing remains to bounce off of. Elena collapsed to her knees. Raul caught her. They waited, unsure if the ground would tremble again. If something would return. But nothing came. Just the soft hum of a sealed system. And a panel with one final message. Omega node closed. Entity neutralized via integrated conduit. Resonance balanced. Human memory retained. They climbed back up, back into the world. The sky was quiet again. The air clean. And for the first time in days they heard birdsong. But Raul knew. Something of Javier remained down there. Not in a cage. But in choice. And the world above? Would never know how close it came to becoming something else. 3 days after the sealing of the Omega node, Raul sat alone on the front porch of his ranch. The desert was quiet. Not the unnatural stillness from before, but a soft, honest silence. The kind that once marked the end of a hot day and the promise of sleep. Elena had returned to her bunker in El Paso. She'd begun gathering the surviving documents, piecing together a final report, not for the government, not for the media, but for those who might someday need to understand what had almost happened. Javier's body was never recovered. Because there was no body. No explosion. No collapse. Just a moment, brief and eternal, where he became something more than himself. Not a hero. Not a martyr. A vessel. Raoul had tried to write it all down. Every detail. Every sound. Every feeling. But every time he reached the page where Javier stepped into the Omega node, the pen would stop. Not because he didn't remember, but because the memory refused to be contained. That night, just after 2 a.m., Raoul was awakened by a soft vibration. Not in the air. Not in the earth. In his chest. He rose, walked outside barefoot. The sky was filled with stars, but they didn't look the same. They shimmered subtly like they were being seen through water. Or through memory. And then, across the dark horizon, a shimmer of green light appeared. A pulse. Not threatening. Not invasive. But familiar. Raoul didn't panic. Instead, he whispered to Javier. No reply came. But the air warmed slightly. The wind carried a tone that wasn't quite sound. Like something or someone briefly trying to say you're not alone. The next morning a letter arrived. No stamp. No name. Just one sentence handwritten in perfect block letters. The entity is not gone. It is sleeping again. And the pillars must be watched forever. Attached was a list of names, survivors from different locations. Former soldiers. Migrants. Witnesses. Every person who had once seen the shimmer in the sky and heard the hum in the dark. Some had disappeared. Some had been silenced. But some were still watching. Raoul knew what this meant. It wasn't over. Not in the way stories end. The entity, born from trauma, shaped by memory, and once given the chance to become something far worse, had simply been delayed. And in time, should humanity once again become reckless with its pain, its silence, its need to forget, the resonance would rise again. Elena joined him that evening. They watched the horizon together. What do we do now? She asked. Raoul didn't answer right away. Then, finally, he said, we build a new kind of pillar. She looked at him, puzzled. What kind? He turned, eyes sharp despite the fatigue. One made of memory. Not metal. A moment of silence passed. And then the two of them began to write not reports. Not classified files. But testimony. So that someday, when the hum returns and the sky cracks open once again, someone will remember. The story was never meant to end in glory. There was no ceremony, no official record, no monument built under the Chihuahuan sun. Only the people who had seen too much, heard too deeply, and survived with more questions than answers. And those who chose to remember. Months had passed since the sealing of the Omega node. Elena had vanished from her lab, deliberately, leaving only encrypted fragments in hidden servers across the dark web. Raoul remained on his land, tending to his animals, watching the sky, and listening for the hum that once shook the bones of the desert. But the pillars remained. To the untrained eye they were nothing. Buried machines masked by dust and history. But to those who had stood before them, to those who had heard the voice that came from nowhere, they were alive. One night, near what would have been the anniversary of Mateo's disappearance, Raoul took out his father's journal one last time. He read the same sentence he once feared. It didn't walk. It floated. And it saw through me. Now Raoul understood. The entity never wanted destruction. It wanted recognition. It was born not from space, but from humanity itself. It had no form of its own. It used trauma as clay and silence as a canvas. What was sealed beneath the earth wasn't a monster. It was a reflection. The sum of everything humanity refused to confront. And in some way, it still was. Weeks later, a radio operator stationed near the Arizona border reported something strange on an unused government frequency. Not a distress call. Not music. A voice. Faint. Digital. But undeniably human. I'm still here. I carry the wound. I carry the silence. I carry the witness. The operator wrote it down. No one believed him. But a week after that, the same voice came through a school intercom system briefly before it went dead. Then, through a decommissioned weather station. Then, an emergency broadcast test in New Mexico. Each time the message was the same. Remember the pillars. Remember the desert. Remember who we are. Then silence. Now, somewhere beneath the shifting sands of the Chihuahuan desert, something waits, not to rise, not to invade, but simply to be remembered. It doesn't need our fear. It feeds on our forgetting. And when the sky splits again, when the hum returns, when your dreams begin to echo with memories that aren't yours, it won't be because something came for us. It will be because we opened the door.